Hey everybody, John here from the esports department, breaking down tonight's 4-game slate in the LPL and LCK. Pretty good little slate we've got here. Some pretty big tournaments. The 444 Forceful Blow is back, the one that I won last time, and try to win it again tonight. Some other pretty good stuff going on, and some good matchups as well. A good little slate for this one, I think. As I talked about in the Discord, I'm going to start bringing up a little bit more information in these breakdowns when I get a chance. Now that we are starting to get some data from this season, it's a little bit tougher. I didn't really want to use last season's data for this portion of the breakdown, but now that we have some, I'm going to start using it a little bit more. So our first matchup, we've got BLG, who's plus 650 for the slate, and they're 1-3 on the season, against Top Esports, minus 1600, 4-0 on the season. You can see their opponent rankings here too. BLG has had a tougher schedule. Their opponents are 9-8, where Top Esports' opponents are 7-10. I don't think that's super relevant for this matchup. I think Top is a pretty big favorite in this matchup regardless. No doubt about that. Let me talk about some of these other stats that I'm going to bring up and what their relevance is. So the first one is gold per minute. This is just a general stat to show how well the team is utilizing the map, whether it be minions, whether it be kills and assists, just generally how well they're utilizing the map to get gold. And you can see a pretty large discrepancy here. Top Esports at 1928 versus 1708 for BLG. Pretty big difference. The next one's gold difference per minute. So this is on average how much gold they're gaining or losing every minute of the game. You can see BLG at minus 162. So in general, whenever the game goes an extra minute, BLG gets 162 gold further behind. And you can see in this matchup, in theory, that's going to be worse because they have a 220 less gold per minute than TES. TES, on the other hand, plus 244 gold difference per minute. These are some stats that can sometimes give away when a team's record is betraying them, if their stats are looking better here, even despite the fact that they're losing. The next one's first blood, first turret. So BLG under 50% on both 30 and 40% respectively on getting either first blood or the first turret. I like to look at those as a snowball stat to see how good this team might be at snowballing games if they get ahead. Top Esports, on the other hand, only slightly above 50%, which is actually a little bit odd for a team as good as Top Esports is. I would expect it to maybe even be a little bit higher, but 55.6 on both. Gold difference at 15, so this is just on average at 15 minutes where they are in gold. For BLG, that's minus 1120, and for Top Esports, plus 1437. So a huge disparity in where they are on average at 15 minutes. When you see two stats like that, you would imagine that Top Esports is going to roll over the games pretty quickly. If BLG is usually this far behind and Top is usually this far ahead, it's a pretty big difference maker. And the last one that I have up here is damage per minute, and this is to champions. So how much damage they're dealing to champions. Sometimes this can be about how much fighting they're doing. A lot of times it's about how much pressure they're putting on their opponents, and just general damage over the course of the game. And you can see Top Esports, once again, completely blows BLG out of the water. So as far as Top Esports and BLG is concerned, not a lot of reason to be on BLG unless you're looking purely at ownership and don't care about anything else. There's really no other reason to be on BLG. They just don't have any advantages against Top Esports at all. Top Esports arguably the best team in the world right now, so it's pretty tough to argue against being on them for this slate. Going to the next two teams, LNG, who is minus 160, 2-2 on the season, against OMG, who is plus 115, 1-4 on the season. You can see both these guys have had pretty hard schedules. OMG's opponents are 14-10, where LNG's opponents are 11-9. Still, they have a reasonably tough schedule on both sides. You can see, though, that OMG's has been just a bit tougher. When you look at gold per minute, so OMG with a just 20 gold per minute advantage, this is the kind of thing you can start looking at where you might say, oh, well, maybe there's more going on here than I would have thought initially. Gold difference per minute, OMG is worse than that metric. They lose about 125 gold per minute to the 64 gold per minute of LNG. First blood and first turret, they both have the same first turret, but LNG has slightly higher first blood percentages. Gold difference at 15. LNG is actually further behind at 15 minutes than OMG is on average. So it's interesting when you see the gold difference per minute be different, but the gold difference at 15 look like this. That tells you that OMG keeps the games close, and then falls way further behind at the end, because this stat ends up being averaged. So at 15 minutes, they're doing better than a team like LNG, but by the time the game is over, they've become so far behind that their per-minute goal differentials are dropping even further. So OMG stays there in the early game and then tends to fall behind way later in the game. Damage per minute to champions, a huge advantage to LNG, 1932 to 1612. So the stats are kind of mixed here. More gold per minute from OMG, less gold difference per minute, better gold difference of 15, worse damage per minute. A pretty even matchup. I think it kind of reflects what we're seeing in the odds. I think maybe OMG should be a little better off and LNG a little worse off than what we're seeing right here. That does seem a little heavy for the odds that we're seeing. But I think OMG or LNG are both probably likely to be pretty solid plays for tonight's slate. We'll have to have a look at the stats in a minute when they pop up, but this game's definitely wide open, and I'm interested to see what the projections for these two teams will end up being. Next up, we have Solheim 1 Prince. Solheim 1 Prince. SHP minus 110. They are 1-1 on the season. Their opponents are 2-2. And then Team Dynamics minus 125. They are 1-1 on the season. Opponents are 2-2. So the 2-2 opponents, 1-1 on the season, all even up. The odds pretty close to even up. What do the other stats say? Dynamics 1743 gold per minute, a slight advantage over Solheim Prince 1722. So you get a 21 gold per minute benefit there. Gold difference per minute, Dynamics actually at plus 70, where Solheim Prince is actually at minus 81. So a pretty different setup there. First blood, first turret, 60-60 for Dynamics, 100% first blood for Solheim Prince. The 100% first blood is pretty impressive. Let's see what that translates into, because it's kind of interesting. When I see 100% first blood, I want to see a pretty good gold difference of 15. We have that so far, plus 261 for them. Dynamics is actually at plus 578. So a pretty huge jump for Dynamics there versus Solheim Prince. Damage per minute to champions, 1946 to 1674, a pretty wild advantage to Dynamics. So in general, these two teams stack up pretty evenly. I'm guessing that the projections for this matchup are kind of off the charts. These are both very bloody teams, despite being LCK teams. And so I definitely think we're going to see high projections on these teams, and we're going to want to be involved with them tonight. I would lean from the statistics that we're seeing here towards Dynamics. Gold difference per minute's better. Damage per minute's way better. Gold difference of 15 is better. They do lose out on first blood more often, but I think Dynamics is going to be a really hot shot play tonight probably. And the last matchup, KT minus 245. They are 0-2 on the season. Their opponents are 2-2. Against HLE, they're plus 175. They are also 0-2 on the season, and their opponents are 2-2. So same strength of schedule. When you look at gold per minute, 1634 to 1628, extremely close. KT with a slight advantage. Gold difference per minute, minus 216 to minus 226. So both teams really struggling as far as gold difference statistics. First blood, first turret, KT has 40-20, and HLE has 16.7 and 33. So terrible first blood and first turret statistics for both teams. Damage per minute to champions, KT leads 1840 to 1774. The goal difference at 15 really stood out to me. Minus 2,000, almost 2,100 for HLE, and minus 1,031 for KT. So both these teams are really struggling in the early game in their first couple matchups of the season. Keep in mind these stats are a little bit more biased since they haven't played as many games yet. But still, these are some pretty shocking numbers, and actually it's even more shocking when you compare them to Solheim and Dynamics, who are both pretty young teams. APK with one split under their belt, Dynamics new to the LCK, even if some of their players aren't. But it's still pretty wild that the damage per minute just beats these two teams. The goal difference at 15 is better on both of these two teams than KT and HLE. These are veteran teams with veteran coaching staffs, veteran players. We're really starting to see that next generation comes through, because it looks like, so far at least, that these two teams are both performing better this season. It's not like these guys are undefeated and their stats are completely marred by the fact that they've only won. They've got losses in there too, and their stats are still significantly better than KT and HLE. So it's still a small sample size. You can't glean anything too huge from it, but it is saying something, and it is very interesting that some teams that kind of had interesting looking rosters coming into this season, like KT and HLE, people thought might take a step up. They might actually be taking a step back with all these new players coming in. So trying to look at ownership for this slate. Let me try to get all the teams down here. BLG, Top Esports, OMG, Dynamics, HLE, KT, APK, or Soul Hey Prince. Why am I forgetting a team? LNG. Duh. Okay, so for ownership on this slate, I think it's pretty straightforward that Top Esports will be the highest owned team. It's hard to deny they're a huge favorite and they're reasonably bloody, but just on a slate like this, I just can't imagine anybody but Top Esports being the most played team. I actually think you're going to see Team Dynamics as the second highest owned team today. It makes a lot of sense to me given a lot of people have been keeping tabs on them. It seems like their stats have been very good. They should win. That game's going to be very bloody. I would expect to see them show up next. LNG and OMG is interesting. I'm guessing it's going to be LNG that shows up as the next team, but I'd have to maybe see the projections. Let me go through the projections first, because that's actually kind of important for this, to see how these games are rating out. So let's leave the favorites in for a minute and have a look at what we see. Let me get rid of the people that aren't playing, or that we don't think are playing anyway. Okay. So for the favorites in the top lane, Dynamics, Rich from Dynamics showing up the biggest, then LNG. Top Esports actually coming third. That's a little bit interesting to me. I would have thought they would have been second. I think Dynamics was a team that was jumping out to me as having high projections today, but I'm surprised that TES is behind LNG. KT coming roundly in last. In the jungle, it is Top Esports on top, so I guess there we go. We're getting a change up there. LNG second with Dynamics third, so they don't have the projections don't have as much faith in Beyond. Going to mid, it's Top Esports, then LNG, then Dynamics. I'll bring up the same thing I brought up with Dynamics before for people, just so that they don't get led astray by this. They're one of about 3 teams in the world right now where our projections might be a little bit sketchy because they're brand new to the LCK and we don't have their old stats. So we're working off a mixture of league average, the couple games that they've played so far, and their opponent statistics. And I think that's going to lead them to be lower in projection than they should be. So when I'm seeing Dynamics in third here to LNG, I'm actually going to assume that they should be second probably. I think their projections are probably a little bit low. There's not very many teams in the world that are like that right now, but yeah, that's a setup where I think we're kind of off a little bit on the projections. Kuro from KT at the bottom. KT looking like staunchly the worst team as far as the favorites were to go. At 80 carry, it's Light, and then Top Esports. KT actually surpassing Dynamics there because Aiming is such a high-scoring player. I would expect Dynamics to be right about in that range, actually. And at support, KT once again at the bottom, Dynamics, Top Esports, and LNG. So Dynamics and Top Esports are probably the 2 highest scoring teams in general, with LNG coming in third, with KT being last, I would guess, for your favorites. So you're looking to pair with probably Top Esports, Dynamics, or LNG as far as favorites go. Let's look at the underdogs real quick. And once again, get rid of people that are not playing. Okay, so for the underdogs, BLG projecting the best if they win. HLE with a good projection in the top lane. OMG projecting the worst if they win. BLG again up top, and then HLE again. OMG and Solhei 1 coming in at last, second to last and last. In the mid lane, BLG again, OMG because Icon generally does pretty well, and then HLE and Solhei. Hybrid, he was an outlier scorer for his team last season, so that's not a huge surprise. BLG, OMG, and HLE in last. And then at support, it's HLE again, Solhei, BLG, and OMG. So kind of generally speaking, it seems like OMG is kind of the lower scoring of the underdogs. And that's kind of good for us because I think OMG is going to be a pretty popular stack. I kind of wanted to look at those setups, but I'm guessing we're going to see OMG actually as the third highest owned team behind Dynamics and Top Esports. Probably followed directly by LNG. I would then put KT because favorites just generally are going to be higher owned. Solhei 1 Prince, HLE, and BLG in last. If there's a part of this list that I don't think is correct, it would probably be somewhere in this range. I'm very confident about the top two and the bottom two. Somewhere in this middle range here, it's possible OMG and LNG are switched. It's possible Solhei and KT are switched. I wouldn't move them around too much. Like, I don't think OMG is going to be 6th highest owned. I think like 3rd or 4th for OMG, 3rd or 4th for LNG, 5th or 6th for KT, 5th or 6th for Solhei. So that's probably what I would expect ownership to look like roughly. It seems like when you're looking at it from this, Solhei Prince makes sense as a team, an underdog that'd be worth targeting. I think HLE is definitely capable of beating KT. I would still probably, even though the ownership's a bit lower, I would still probably fade off of KT from what we saw in their numbers up there. It just seems like you're better off shooting for Top Esports or Dynamics or the winner of LMG, OMG. It seems like you're going to get better scoring out of that. KT feels like a team that you could get away from. And then BLG feels like a team that you can definitely get away from unless you're playing really big field GPPs and you just want to throw a lottery ticket in there, basically. As far as cash games go, Top Esports is indisputed. Like, they just have to be in your cash games, basically, for sure. And then it kind of seems like KT, it would have to be either KT or LNG. I just feel like the LNG OMG line is just off. I feel like this minus 160 is too big of a number. I don't think I would trust them. And I think Prince and Dynamics is close enough that I don't think you could go there either. So honestly, I think the thing that makes the most sense to me for cash is to try to take the safe options with KT and Top Esports. You can get a support captain with 4 Top Esports players. That's definitely reasonable with aiming and Tucson, which makes sense. What happens if instead of playing KT, we played Dynamics? That gets you Kuzan captain, so that's a pretty big... You're getting a mid captain instead. It is a 3-3 where you'd probably want 4 Top Esports players in your lineup, so you may have to drop down to mid captain to get 4 Top Esports players in your lineup. Because I think on a slate like this, it's just kind of unforgivable not to have 4 Top Esports players. If you go to LNG, it's top captain. It's a 610 expectation with them, a 648 with Dynamics. So, depends how much you believe in Dynamics, I guess. If you really believe in Dynamics, which I think there's reasonable reason to believe in Dynamics, you can probably get a jungle captain with 4 Top Esports. Let's see. Just about 1,000 more. So yeah, you'd probably have to switch over to... Let me see if we did that Kuzan captain, but we played the cheapest people in every position. Is that a possibility? You'd save 1,200 by going to Rich. You'd still want to play 4 top though. That would leave you 6,200. Oh, that's still a 3-3 though. Play Dynamics team. Yeah, that leaves you 1,400, so you can still actually swap either top or 80 carry. Yeah, you can play Kuzan captain with 4 Top Esports. That I think is at a 636 expectation. I think that's what I would shoot for. the difference in price between those two is big enough that I don't think you can swap them. Yeah, not quite. So yeah, that seems like the best play to me. You could also, I guess, if you're worried about Dynamics losing, which I think is a real worry, you can play Karsa in your captain. It's all about how safe you want to be, how safe you think you need to feel for this slate, because you can play Karsa captain with 4 top esports. It gets you a lower projection, but if Dynamics happen to lose and you were up against somebody else who was playing top in Dynamics, you'd be happy to have Karsa as your captain instead of having a Dynamics player as your captain. So you can go kind of either way on that one. As far as GPPs, it seems like Dynamics and TES is a playable combination. If you're getting a mid captain, I can't see a ton of reason not to play those two in GPPs, even though they're both favorites. With LNG, we were getting a top captain, right? I think it was giving us a top lane captain, and that's still a 3/3, so that's pretty dirty. I don't know if I would go with a lot of LNG and TES. Just looking at it for a minute here. I really don't love the idea of playing a top captain on a 4-game slate. If it was a 2-game slate, yeah, no problem. But 369 isn't even a good scoring top laner. Chenlin is pretty good, but it's a little bit sketchy to go down to a double top lineup in a major GPP when you have 4 games on the slate. If these do end up being the 2 highest scoring teams, it's very possible that this kind of lineup could win, so don't completely shut that out, but it makes me more likely to want to play top in Dynamics and less likely to want to play top in LNG. At the same time, everything's always a double-edged sword in DFS. Like, this lineup's probably not going to be that highly owned, whereas the Dynamics ones probably are. So it's just a gamble. It's a gamble depending on the size of your field. The bigger the field, the more weird stuff you want to play. If you're playing the $15, try running some top lane captains and see if you can get there. I assume if you're playing with underdogs, let's see. Well, if you're playing with Prince is actually priced pretty much the same as Dynamics. Let's see. 9,300 in the jungle, 9,600 in the jungle. So yeah, they're very similarly priced. So you can also only get a jungle captain with SP. If you switch over to, let's see, what if I took Karsa out of here and instead put in Mickey? You could afford that, but then you still wouldn't be able to afford. So you can actually get a better stack with Dynamics than you can with Solheim 1. That's just going to make Dynamics even higher owned and SP probably lower owned. So I like this even more, given that Dynamics is even easier to make lineups with. So for GPPs, you don't have to fade top esports just because they're going to be highly played. Just try to get some. You can try to get some weird combinations with them in Dynamics, them with Prince, them with HLE maybe, them with OMG. You can definitely get some combinations in there that I think are pretty good. The OMG LNG matchup feels like you could go to either side of that. What happens if we get top and OMG instead? Top and OMG is just an 80 carry captain lineup, so you're just maximizing there, especially since the stats kind of told us that OMG maybe was being a little overlooked in the line for that matchup. So those are a lot of different places to go tonight, a lot of different stats to think about. I hope that's interesting information for everybody, and good luck tonight. Hit me on the Twitter and the Discord as usual. Stop by to watch the show match tonight in about 2.5 hours at 6 Eastern time. We're going to be playing a show match against the RotoWire guys. Should be fun. My son Adam will probably play with us as well. Should be a good game. Stop by. Gelati will stream it. We'll have a lot of fun, guys, and I will talk to you later.